This is my PMBOK 7th edition review, including my most honest and brutally truthful thoughts about it. Now that the PMBOK Guide 7th edition has been released for over a year now, I've actually read it cover to cover multiple times and used it to pass my own PMP exam. So in this video, I'm going to share with you my overall impressions and thoughts, the pros versus the cons, as well as the sections that helped me out the most, along with a breakdown of my own personal recommendations. If you want my cheat sheet of the entire PMBOK guide so you know which concepts to focus on for your CAPM or your PMP exam, download my free PMBOK guide cheat sheet at alvinthepm.com/PM7. Now before we get into it, what are your honest thoughts about the PMBOK Guide 7th edition? Do you love it or do you hate it? Share with me your thoughts by leaving me a comment down below. So my overall impression of the PMBOK Guide 7th edition is actually really positive. It's a really thin book, less than 300 pages that you could easily carry with you, leave on your desk as a reference aid, and it's super easy to read, very user-friendly, and there's a lot more images that you can look at in comparison to the previous edition of the 6th edition. From time to time, I have actually opened it up to look up concepts, tools, or different key terms that I needed to remember, or if I need a little bit more guidance with how to lead specific projects at work. If you own the PMBOK Guide 6th edition, then you know just how much more different it is, just due to how much lighter the book actually is and the content that's inside. So here's the PMBOK Guide 7th edition, and here's the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. A huge difference, right? As you can see, the PMBOK Guide 6th edition is so much more thicker and much more difficult to actually carry in your backpack. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have actually almost fallen asleep on my couch when I was skimming through and reading the PMBOK Guide 6th edition back when I was studying for my own CAPM exam. Now, of course, there are pros and cons to the 7th edition, just like with any other textbook. For me, I would say that the pros do outweigh the cons, but hear me out first. The latest PMBOK Guide is a good reference aid for anyone who supports or leads a project in their career. I do think that it's more tailored for those who have more experience in their careers, but overall, I would say that it covers many of the overarching principles to be successful as a project manager. Because the 7th edition of the PMBOK Guide is very thin and it's very easy to read and understand, many of the sections and chapters are super easy to skim and just get right to the point and to the information that you need. It reads kind of more like a book instead of an encyclopedia, which is how I felt like the PMBOK Guide 6th edition was for me. And that's probably what I really like the most about it. By the way, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Now, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition is also not prescriptive in nature at all. It's not designed for you to use every single tool, process, or method that's described inside. You can choose the ones which make the most sense for your project's needs. One other thing that I think caused a lot of disruption in the PM community is that it shifted its focus completely from an ITTO model or an input, tools, techniques, and outputs to more of an outcome-focused model where it tells you the principles that you should follow, and how you get there using different steps, tools, or methods will be primarily up to your discretion. So for me, the 7th edition has been a really good refresher of key concepts in project management. It's still heavily theory-based, but it definitely has more application examples than the previous 6th edition. There's even an entire chapter that's dedicated to the different models, methods, and artifacts that we can use as project managers. So it's definitely a good resource to have on hand if you're trying to remember a tool, an artifact, or a model to better lead your teams. For example, I didn't know as much about the Knife framework until I read the PMBOK Guide 7th edition. So in many ways, it opened up my mind to new terms and techniques that I didn't even know about previously, such as moving targets of completion or what's called the done drift. Now the 7th edition is also so much more colorful with so many more images and tables. It just has that more modern feeling that version 2.0, which the 6th edition didn't necessarily have. One thing that I also really like about the latest 7th edition is that there are really good charts, visual diagrams, and tables that you can quickly reference. For example, on page 124, there's a great example that you can follow to see what a risk threat profile looks like. And table 3-1 on page 151 gives a clear layout of different examples to follow if you need to tailor your project based on a specific scenario. And one of the best images is probably page 154 because it completely summarizes the entire PMBOK guide in one picture. Now, in terms of the cons, the PMBOK Guide 7th edition can still seem very theoretical with more technical jargon and verbiage that, if you're not too experienced or maybe you're fresh right out of college, it may go completely over your head. For example, when it talks about systems thinking or how to deal with complexity in the chapter on uncertainty, it's still very high level and it may not completely make sense to you, especially if you just graduated out of college. Since the 7th edition focuses on delivering outcomes, it doesn't necessarily teach you the how or what's involved with a day-to-day to make a project successful. And that's because it's not prescriptive and it's not meant to explain everything in extreme detail. It's really just a quick reference, and that's why I believe the guide itself is geared more towards those who have a little bit more experience underneath their belt. Another thing that I've found is that it doesn't always give specific examples for everything. There are examples in certain situations. For example, when the PMBOK guide explains the differences between the predictive, agile, and hybrid approach, but not for everything. For example, on page 123, the 7th edition provides a great overarching view of different strategies that you can use if you're navigating negative risks on your project, but it doesn't actually provide you with concrete specific examples. So you're going to have to search online or refer to other references if you want a deeper dive on a specific concept, method, or a topic. Another example I do have is the PMBOK guide lists the entire set of tools that you can use as a project manager inside the very last chapter. It only explains them at a very superficial level, but in terms of the practical applications, the how-to, and downloadable examples that you can follow, you're going to have to reference that either using PMI's website or other external websites. And this is probably the biggest point. It shows you what tools are available at your disposal, and then it's going to be completely up to you to reference other material to do a deeper dive and learn how to use that specific tool or artifact. In terms of my favorite sections, I actually really like the standard itself, specifically from pages 40 to 42. It's incredibly well done and it thoroughly explains what makes a great leader, all distilled into a list of bullet points that you can quickly skim through. Highly recommend checking out those pages if you're trying to level up your leadership ability. Read those pages and ask yourself, do you follow each characteristic and how can you level up your skill set to be a better leader? Something to keep in mind is that you don't have to have an official title as a manager or a director to be a leader. The last sentence on page 43 states that any team member can motivate or influence others regardless of their role or position. The other chapter that I love the most is chapter 2.3 on the development approach. I really like how the PMBOK guide explains each approach and provides a robust example using the construction of a community center to explain the difference between an iterative versus an incremental approach. So with all that said, is the PMBOK Guide 7th edition actually worth it? I say yes, and I recommend grabbing a copy yourself. Check out the links down below and definitely keep this as a handy desk reference for the future when you're looking up different concepts, tools, methods, or artifacts that you might need to use in the future. You can easily skim through the entire PMBOK guide in less than a few days, and for me, just a section alone on the development approach is worth it to get a better understanding of the differences between the predictive, hybrid, and adaptive approaches. If you want to learn everything about the PMBOK guide, watch this video next because it's my entire free course covering all the chapters of the PMBOK guide 7th edition, and I'll see you in the next video.